inside of them. But you wouldn't know it inside the door. La-di-dee, la-di-da. Gotta know where you've been to know who you are. La-di-dee, la-di-dee. Tell me, baby, just what you see. Yeah. Well, well. It's a little piece. I just came up with that just like 30 minutes ago. Hopefully it'll turn into a song, but now I just got a verse and a chorus. But the subject matter is something. We're going to go a little off topic today. This is like a little side commentary because I've been online lately and I have been hearing, reading just the anger, man. I've always had a fascination with Egypt and Nubia and a lot of these ancient African civilizations that I remember clearly. I know my mother and stepfather had went to the King Tut exhibit in San Francisco when it was years ago. I was like 11 or 12, and they brought back this beautiful like coffee table book, and I was going through it, and I was like, I even asked my mother. I was like, well, why does everything look so African? Granted, it was just the appearance, but I mean, it hit me really, like it was obvious. And she said, well, it is in Africa. And, at that point, I was like, I was never taught world history in that way, like putting Egypt in the context of African history. I was trying to explain online that, because people are like, what is all this, all of a sudden the Egyptians are black, blah, 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 blah. Well, evidence shows that most of the Egyptians, especially the early dynasties up to the middle, they would have been definitely black here in America. And even up to the 18th dynasty, that's King Tut, his father, the Pharaoh Akhenaten, his grandmother, Queen T, and Amenhotep II, I think. No, three. They clearly are African, with African features and everything. And nowhere do we see this except when you look for it. I mean, it's obvious. You can go there and look at the reliefs and sculptures that are there in the Cairo British Museum. I mean, they're there for people to see, but they don't show it. Like when they talk about it, they're never. It's not those things are very cleverly cherry picked to represent what we think of as Egypt because it's been so sanitized. Well, not sanitized, but what do you want to say? Whitewashed. Since for as long as I know, and I was trying to explain to people that some people were like, why is this so important? It must be really a shame that this makes you feel better. Well, I think some white students take it for granted. This is like early on. I don't know what the age of the people I was talking to, but I think they take it for granted that, like in history, at least when I was coming up, pretty much they were the center of all the action in world history, and I never heard anything about. You had to take a specific African history class to know about this stuff, and you shouldn't. It should be readily available for everyone to know. And history does matter. And I always hear this stuff where you guys came from West Africa. Well, West Africa has a great medieval history. I don't know the further back, but I know like the Timbuktu, the famed Timbuktu is actually a place in Mali. It was a place of higher learning in the 15th century. There was Benin, that is modern day Nigeria, and it's always been sophisticated. I mean, they had even Portuguese explorers that saw it, witnessed how organized I guess it was kind of like a city. I wouldn't say a whole civilization at that point, but this has always been there, and we just, because of the racism and all that in this country, we just. What was annoying me, it was like there was no reason for the hostility. There was no reason for the like automatically just rejecting it out of hand. Why would it bother you? Why would it bother some people if the Egyptians were black, which they clearly are? This is in Africa, you know what I mean? And these people clearly were Africans. Now things in Egypt became more cosmopolitan later on when there was more invasions and stuff, and northern northern Egypt now has been very Arabicized. It's like Arabian and Muslim because they invaded, but they invaded long after the zenith of dynastic Egypt. That was separate. There was a period long before any invasions, and that was the time where the pyramids were built, the Sphinx, and all you have to do is look at the Sphinx. Look at the profile of the Sphinx. There was a well-known forensic scientist that looked at the Sphinx's face and said, it's an African. It has all like these features. There's a term called prognathism, I think, and that's kind of like the jaw being a little bit more pushed forward, and that's distinctly African trait. It gets funny because there's all kind of Africa's got the most diversity of any continent because that's all where we all come from. But I just get kind of annoyed when it's like, well, you can feel pride to be part of quote unquote Western civilization, the Greco-Roman tradition and all that. Even Thomas Jefferson talked about it, we're heirs to that. Well, if you can be heirs to that, no matter where you live in the U.S. or where you lived in Europe, then we can take pride in what was achieved on the continent of Africa. It's a matter of it's just like we have a double standard. Like I said, I made the point where they said, well, Egypt is right on the thing, that's right in the Mediterranean, and it is, right? But I also said, well, okay, so we'll make Italy, it's not really Europe, it's like Africa. That's kind of what you're doing with Egypt. Italians are darker than, usually darker than other Europeans, and it's right there, maybe 80 miles away from Africa. So we can make the same point that way, but it's never made that way. It's always made when we're talking about Africa. And then you have the Nubian civilization right next door, which would be modern day Sudan, and we don't know how far that goes back. We don't know whether, obviously, Egypt was bigger and grander, but it would be kind of like Britain and us, where the rings of this country came from England or wherever, and America became a superpower, and overshadowing the birthplace. And I think that that's the case with Egypt, because everything shows that the movement was south. I had read where everyone says the sub-Saharan. It's just such bullshit. It's that term wasn't even used until the late 1970s, and it's a way to kind of cut Africa in half. When there's evidence now that the Sahara wasn't always this big desert that it was. It dried up, where at one point it was green with animals, and when it started to dry up, that coincides with the first dynasties. So it's these people that were in this area, that would have been the Sahara, some of them migrated to the Nile Valley, and that became Nubia and Egypt. And like I said, later on there was influx of other people, but during this early stage, and this would have been the time of the pyramids, they were pretty black. So I just don't know why it's so hard to accept that with people. What's the hang up? It's irritating to some people that African Americans would take pride in this part of civilization, and it does mean something. History does mean something, or we wouldn't teach it. As I was just saying, you got to know where you've been to know where you're going. And that's very true. I know it was important to me when I was a kid when I found out, and I found out for myself, and I did my own reading on it, because I didn't get it. It should be there in normal world history, and it should be taught that way. So. But anyway, I know I went a little off topic today. Usually we're talking about music or entertainment or something, but it's kind of a pet peeve. It just irritates me to no end, and I can't wait till it kind of becomes normalized that this is what it is. And it was a long time in doing. There was old, bigoted historians during the 18th and 19th century that they tried to cut this whole part of Africa off like it wasn't part of Africa, because they found high civilization there. And now we're finding everything. We're finding some great Zimbabwe, all these things that they didn't think Africans could do. And unfortunately, that stigma continues. And that's why I think some people get really upset when you talk about it, or oh, it doesn't mean that much. Well, it kind of does. It kind of does. And I think some people take it for granted because they've always known their background. And this is, part of this half of my background. and it's something that I wanted to know and feel good about. I mean, when you look at Queen Tea, and this is like, I don't know, what was that, like 1300 years before Christ? You know, we're talking a long time ago, and the rest of the world was pretty much in the dark at that time. You know, around 1500. Well, the first dynasty was like 3500 BC, and they're always finding stuff a little older. So you know. So anyway, just wanted to get that off my chest. We'll be having another upload by the weekend, and I'm sorry I took a little break here to visit with family and stuff, but I'm back now. And so this is Adventures in Mood City, pet peeve commentary, signing out. Love y'all. And please subscribe. Press the subscribe button and the little bell so you'll get notified when I have new content up, okay? All right.